Anyone who has fished in both the northern and southern regions of the U.S. know that there are some significant differences in fishing techniques, even when targeting the same species. Baits and presentations that work in one region don't necessarily have the same success in the other. In this video, I'm going to present the differences in these two regions of the country and why I believe fishing in the northern region can be tougher than fishing in the southern region. I'm also going to explain why I believe this is one of the primary reasons that Kevin Van Dam is the GOAT of bass fishing. This video will likely create some controversy, but hear me out. Now, before I get into this, it's important to note that I am only talking about freshwater fishing here and not saltwater fishing. Saltwater fishing has some very different dynamics as compared to freshwater fishing, and I'm not going to tackle that in this video. With that said, let's get into it. Over the course of my life, I've had the privilege of fishing in various regions throughout the eastern half of the United States and Canada. The waters in these regions range from glacial-made wilderness lakes in Canada to the Great Lakes of the Midwest to the large impoundments of the American South. And throughout that time, I've come to learn that there are some major differences between these waters that are critical to understand if you want to have success. But before we get into what these differences are, I want to go over the drivers that have led to these differences. During the last ice age, glaciers extended much further south on the North American continent than they exist today. These glaciers made it as far south as the Ohio Valley before starting their retreat back northward. In their path, these glaciers carved countless grooves and depressions throughout the landscape. And as the ice melted, many of these were filled with crystal clear glacial ice. This is the main reason that there are so many natural lakes in the Great Lakes region of North America. It is also the reason for the Great Lakes themselves. In fact, there are so many natural lakes formed in this part of North America that the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota have more large natural lakes each than the Green Lakes shown on this map combined. Natural lakes in the South are rare. In fact, you may be surprised to find out that the states of Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Texas have just one large natural lake each. So how can fishing be so popular in the South when there are so few natural lakes in that part of the continent? To answer that question, we need to go back a ways in history. As the Second Industrial Revolution came to a close, it was becoming obvious that big machinery could be used to help improve the lives of many in many different ways. And some of the biggest impacts to the South came via the construction of large dams to provide electricity and to control flooding from the many rivers that meandered throughout the countryside. During the 20th century, there was an explosion in dam construction throughout the United States. It was during this time that many of the man-made lakes of the South were created. A major benefit of these lakes, of course, was recreation of many types, including fishing. Not only were these lakes very fertile due to the soils in that part of the continent, but because of the many trees that existed in these waters, the impoundments hold an immense amount of natural cover for fish. Now, while it may seem on the surface that a lake is a lake, there are a couple of key differences between these man-made lakes of the South and the glacial lakes of the North. And these differences can really impact fishing presentations and techniques. Because many of the rivers, streams, and creeks that meander through the South are draining farmland, their associated impoundments tend to be cloudy or even muddy due to the many small particles that are suspending in the water. Water with a lot of suspended material in it is known as turbid water. In contrast, the glacial lakes of the North tend to be much clearer. This is because there is much less farmland in this part of the country. Furthermore, the headwaters of many of these streams and creeks are born from underground springs, which act as natural water filters due to the amount of sand and gravel in the ground. This results in crystal clear water. And water clarity has a significant impact on a fish's ability to see their prey. Fish in clear water have the ability to use their primary sense of sight, much more so than fish in turbid water. Fish in clear water will often follow their prey for several seconds to even minutes before making the decision to strike. In contrast, Fish that can't see their prey don't have the luxury of this examination. This means that they often will strike out of reaction the minute they detect the bait. This detection could come from a vibration sensed by their lateral lines, but could also be detected by just a quick glimpse of the bait. So how does this affect our ability to catch fish? In clear water, we need to make sure that the bait we're using is something the fish will believe is prey when they see it. Because they have the ability to see these baits, they rely less on things like their lateral lines and smell. This means that both the bait itself and our presentation technique have to be well refined in order to fool the fish into biting. Of course, none of this is to say that catching fish in turbid water is easy. It also doesn't mean that fishing in clear water is always difficult. There are a lot of factors that go into how readily a fish strikes any bait. Another major difference between southern waters and northern waters is water temperature. In general, waters of the northern climate are much cooler than waters of the southern climate, and this has a direct effect on a fish's metabolism. Metabolism dictates how much energy fish use and therefore how much food a fish needs. The cooler the water, the lower a fish's metabolism, and therefore the less need to find food. Furthermore, because fish are often trying to conserve energy in cooler water, they can't afford to waste as much energy chasing. It is therefore very important to slow down your techniques in cooler waters. In fact, at times, the presentation needs to be painstakingly slow. So what does all this mean with respect to the world of competitive bass fishing? Over the years, professional bass fishing has been dominated by fishermen from the South. This is due in large part to the fact that bass fishing has traditionally been more popular in the southern part of the country. So it seems unusual, and even statistically unlikely, that a man who many consider to be the best bass fisherman of all time would have come from a northern state. And yet, Kevin Van Dam is just that, a northerner through and through. With 25 wins, Kevin Van Dam has won more BASS tournaments than any other angler. And one of the likely contributors to his success is that KVD grew up fishing in the clear, cold northern waters and essentially learned how to catch fish that are harder to entice. And if this seems like a stretch, I've got one more data point to share that will convince you. Who do you think has the second most BASS tournament wins in history? Well, his name happens to be none other than Roland Martin. And one of Roland's home fishing lakes in Maryland is known as Rocky Gorge Reservoir. And you guessed it, this reservoir is crystal clear. The bottom line in all this is that if you want to be the best fisherman you can be, learning to fish in crystal clear water is essential to ensuring that you've developed the most refined techniques necessary to catch the most finicky of fish.